Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's forum on the school literacy and teacher education. My name is Professor Pauline Taylor-Guy, and I'm the Research Director of the Centre for the School and System Improvement at the Australian Council for Educational Research. This is the 8th forum as part of the Australia-India Education Researcher Forum series, facilitated by the Australia-India Institute. These online forums provide a platform to showcase research in education disciplines from both nations and explore opportunities for new research collaborations. Today's forum focuses on school literacy and teacher education, joint national priorities for India and Australia, and topics very close to my researcher heart. In this webinar, researchers will highlight national schemes and policies governing school education, literacy rates, and teacher education. Building on this background of ambitious education policies, our expert speakers will shed light on some of the shared challenges at the implementation level, including issues of equity and access, inclusive pedagogy and literacy, and funding and governance of teacher training and management. By this knowledge sharing exercise, speakers will end by exploring some of the emerging opportunities for future research collaboration in this area between both countries. I will introduce our panel speakers shortly, but first, as the moderator for today's forum, I'd like to share a little more about my own work as Director of ACR's Centre for School and System Improvement. I have been an educator for the whole of my professional career, a teacher, then a school leader, a system leader, and then I moved into an academic career as a teacher educator before joining ACR in 2016. The main focus of our work is supporting national and jurisdictional education systems to transform, to ensure that all students have the opportunity to be well prepared as learners and for life and for work. We see education systems as learning ecosystems where different elements such as effective teaching, curricula, assessment, school leadership work coherently with the learner as the focus. We support system transformation by establishing, from evidence, current practice against international benchmarks and support improvement through evidence-based implementation strategies and capacity building. And I can see people dropping into the chat, so that is absolutely fantastic. So now to our panel discussion. I'm going to introduce you to our expert speakers. So first, I'm going to introduce you to Vineeta Sirohi. Vineeta is a professor in the Department of Educational Administration at the National Institute of Education Planning and Administration in New Delhi, and academic fellow with the Australia-India Institute. She has more than 3 decades of experience encompassing teaching, research, training, curriculum and material development, project and program coordination, administration and counselling. Welcome, Vineeta.
Thank you.
Next, I'm going to introduce you to Vimala Ramachandran. And Vimala is a retired professor of teacher management and founder of an educational research and consulting group known as the ERU Consultants. She's been working on school education with a specific focus on gender and equity issues and teacher development and motivation. Welcome, Vimala. Next, we have Dr. Georgina Barton, who is a professor of literacies and pedagogy in the School of Education at the University of Southern Queensland, so just up the road from where I am currently. Her main research areas are literacy, the arts and wellbeing, and current projects include the Lab School project and School of Self-Care for Teachers. And the final expert that we have with us today is Associate Professor Rekha Kool, who is an Australian-Indian educational researcher and is currently Deputy Head and STEM Lead at the School of Education in Curtin University. She started her academic career in Kashmir, India, which involved developing educational programs for women. Dr. Kool has over 3 decades of teaching and research experience. At the conclusion of our panel discussion, there'll be an opportunity to ask some questions and get some answers from our panel. But what I'd really like you to do is also comment and ask some questions within the chat box within Zoom, and I'll keep an eye on that as we go through. So let's get started. So let's think about issues of equity and access. So issues of equity and access constitute a common set of challenges for quality school education, literacy and teacher development across both Australian and Indian contexts. So within the Indian education infrastructure, what kinds of policy interventions have shaped or are shaping discourses and practices around bridging these gaps? And I'm going to call on Vineeta and then Rekha to respond.
Thank you, Pauline. And I would start with mentioning about the Indian school education system, which is one of the largest in the world, with nearly 14.89 lakh schools, more than 95 lakh teachers, and nearly 265.2 million students of pre-primary to higher secondary level from varied socioeconomic backgrounds. Now, the system strives to maintain standards and uniformity across the country while giving ample scope for the country's diverse culture and heritage to grow and flourish. The total enrollment in schools from class 1, grade 1 to 12 has increased by 0.76% in 2021-22 as compared with the previous year, with increase in enrollment at all levels of school education. And it is heartening to note that at present, the GPI is 1 or more at all the levels of school education, and the PTR also has improved during the year 21-22. Coming to the transition rates, the number of dropouts are reported on transition from one stage of school education to another. And the data indicates that the transition rate from primary to upper primary level of education is 93%. And as there is increase in the stage of education, the transition rate declined with an increase in dropout rates. So only 78% transited from secondary to higher secondary in 2021-22. And there is also variation in the transition rates across the states. India faces critical challenges, of course, in providing access to quality education, as Indian education landscape is diverse with disparities across states and UTs, rural, urban, and socioeconomic backgrounds. The National Education Policy 2020 focuses on equitable access to education for all sections of society, including the marginalized communities, children with disabilities, and those living in the remote areas. The policy aims to bridge the digital divide and promote digital literacy to ensure access to online resources and education. Multilingualism is another inherent feature of our cultural fabric, representing rich linguistic diversity. To address this, the policy focuses on early education in mother tongue, developing bilingual textbooks, and children's literature in multiple languages. And there's another focus on continuous and professional development of the teachers also to stay updated with innovative teaching practices and evolving pedagogy. The major initiatives, best practices in view of implementing NEP 2020 to provide access to quality education are NIShtha, the National Initiative for Schools, Heads and Teachers Holistic Development. This is an integrated teacher training program to build capacities of teachers at the elementary level and the heads of the schools, faculty members of SCRT and diets, block resource coordinators, cluster resource coordinators. There is another initiative by the name of NIPUN, that is National Initiative for Proficiency in Reading with Understanding and Numeracy, which has been launched under Samagra Shiksha to make sure that every child necessarily attains foundational literacy and numeracy by the end of grade 3. The digital initiatives have also been made reaching out to every learner and providing equitable, inclusive education under PME Vidya, which unifies all the efforts of online digital education to enable multimodal learning access to students, teachers, parents, ensuring inclusion to overcome digital divide. Then there we have also the Diksha portal, where e-content in the form of audios and videos are provided by the states, and e-courses, textbooks. There are video classes for grade 1 and 5 in Indian Sign Language, and vocational education videos on 19 sector-wise job roles for grade 9 and 12, 9 to 12, sorry. And in the area of inclusive education, NEP also focuses on developing universal design of learning based accessible teaching learning material on holistic development of students with special needs. The policy advocates that curriculum-based material in Indian Sign Language needs to be developed, and there is a lot of e-content that has been developed to reach every corner of the country. And there's a focus on toy-based pedagogy, experiential learning, which focuses on modules being prepared for the foundational stage. And under Vidya Pravesh, there has been the guidelines which are issued for 3-month play-based school preparation module for grade 1 children to develop school readiness. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vineeta. That was really comprehensive. So many initiatives and policies there. I'm going to hand over to Rekha now to respond to that question.
I echo your comment, Pauline. It was a very, very comprehensive detail of what's happening on ground right now. And while Vineeta was talking, and the thought process revolved around where India has reached because of these initiatives. India still has, it's an adopted education system, which was given to India during the colonization. And at the time of independence in 48, India had 18% literacy and currently claims to have 77%, which is a huge leap ahead, but much needs to be done. And at the same time, what all these years, my work in India till now, I haven't been able to find a definition how we define literacy. Maybe we'll have to ask Vineeta or Vimla later. But India still, right now, it spends 11.3 billion pounds on education, but it is only 2.9% of its GDP. And when we were talking about NEP 2020 and even the national curriculum policies, there were reviews called national curriculum reviews. They also had recommended that at least 6% of the GDP should be spent on education. We have done a lot, but what's happening because of that gap in the equity still exists. It's not to say that low SES or disadvantaged people are not doing well. There are quite a few examples where lots of disadvantaged people are doing well, and they are celebrated. And at the same time, the best thing what India got sometime in early 2000, that right to education was passed for the first time. That means, according to that, primary education was made compulsory for all, and that really pushed India's literacy rate, and that gap has been really closed. Then I think about, yes, we are talking about India, which is an emerging economy, but then I looked at the diversity here in Australia, and the university where I work, we have the National Center for Equity in Higher Education. It's housed in Curtin, but it services all the 39 universities around the nation. And in NCEHE, whatever you call the center, it takes only 4 equity issues and works on them, which is low SES, rural and regional student, indigenous, and students with disabilities. There are many other groups, like I being a STEM educator, and I'm trying to look at females in STEM, which is, again, like gender equity is another issue in India. The diversity, what Vineeta talked about, is a big issue. And how are we going to, fill the gap? Possibly, I'm not supposed to say the solutions. We need more money. We need the promised 6% spend on GDP needs to be increasing, or at least reach that area. I think if we could do that, and then only we here in Australia, our population is diverse. We have a huge population which are of migrants, refugees, women in non-traditional roles. They need support, and I would expect that similar cohorts would need that sort of support in India. And although they have these policies and they have these schemes, but how many will come under the umbrella of that needs to be seen. In my last research, I identified quite a few private providers, which are also filling in the gap. And that gap, those providers don't come in this 2.9% GDP. And they are doing a great service in the country and helping to create that gap. Possibly we need to even document their contribution and see how it's helping the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Rekha. I think there's so much in this space, so many initiatives, so much in this space. I'm actually going to cut to a second question now and bring Georgina into the fold, because I know...
May I just respond to the first question before we go in? I would take more than a minute.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
I'm sorry, but I have been working for over 40 years in this field. India has excellent policies, but policies and feel-good intentions do not translate into actual action on the ground. Programs, activities, strategies, and allocation of resources depends on both administrative policies and political priorities. So India, yes, is a country of huge differences. And I do feel that just having national policies has not made a difference. We need context-specific regional policies, community-specific policies and practices and action to make a difference. Just rattling off all the great schemes that India has does not give us the full picture. Yes, literacy rates in India have gone up enormously. Enrollment and participation in school education has gone up. But most of you know that learning outcomes is extremely poor. Children do not have access to meaningful education where actually teaching learning happens. So let us take policies with a huge pound of salt.
I saw that, Vimala, in the comment there. That's right. Huge challenges in translating policy into meaningful actions on the ground. I think that's going to be one of our big topics in Q&A. So let's just cut to the issue of inclusion now, and talking about literacy in particular. So inclusive models of literacy are integral to designing classroom environments that are respectful and cognizant of the surrounding structures of diversity and inequity that determine access to education in the first place. That's been a key theme so far, hasn't it? In an age where technology-facilitated learning is quickly becoming the norm, and we heard about some of the digital initiatives in India, what are some of the ways in which holistic and innovative models of literacy can be developed? And Georgina, I'm going to invite you to respond to that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline. And it's just so great to hear this conversation. I'm very excited to be here. I mentioned to the other panelists that I lived in India a long time ago as an Australian volunteer abroad, and I learnt the Carnatic music tradition on violin and voice. So that has actually influenced a lot that I do. I do want to start by saying I'm not a special education researcher. So when I speak about inclusion, I'm not coming from that lens. I'm rather coming from a socio-cultural ethnographer perspective. So the first thing I did want to mention, and I think Vineeta pointed to this a bit too, was about the digital divide when we think about educational technologies. There are still many students, even here in Australia, who don't have access to regular internet. And I think that's going to increase with the cost of living. We definitely saw this during the COVID-19 lockdowns, where many children actually didn't have a computer to log into their classroom because there may have been 4 or 5 children at home and only one computer to share between the 5 of them. Or I did hear of a story where one child had to use their grandmother's phone to log into home. So I think it's really important to consider that when we think about digital technologies. At the beginning, it mentioned I'm working currently on a project called the Lab School Project, which involves literacy, the arts, and well-being. And so for me, inclusion is really around multimodal communication. So we do still have children who, as Vineeta mentioned, aren't reaching the literacy standards that they should be. And that's for all sorts of reasons. There might be childhood trauma or other experiences impacting their learning. It could be that they have special learning needs or super diversities that Vertivec talks about in the research literature. So I do want to acknowledge that in Australia, there has been a huge push for the science of reading approach to teaching literacy. And while that can work very well for the majority of children, it doesn't work for all children. And I also really acknowledge and value an art of reading approach where beautiful children's literature is used in the classroom. And I know this happens in Indian schools because there's just such a wealth of, ongoing and ancient literature that can be used in classrooms there as well. In terms of technologies for inclusion, it's really important to consider adaptive technologies. So one of my recent doctoral students was looking at how to support blind and low vision students through many types of technologies, not just Braille, but using speech to text. And I know many high schools use that for students who struggle with literacy too. So I often work alongside teachers to design their planning and curriculum and assessment tasks. And I often get them to think about student choice. So my projects really found that when students get to choose how to represent meaning, so it's not just always through written word, but of course that's very important, but there's other ways they could do so. So for example, students for one unit I was working on actually presented a sequel to a story through iMovie trailers or digital collages, soundscapes that they recorded to GarageBand, various forms of artworks like pastel drawings on cardboard, acrylic paintings and sketches, that sort of thing. If we were to really address the inequalities in education, we need to think about how each student can represent their strength, I believe. And with the Sustainable Development Goals, SDG number 4, which is on quality education, their mission statement is to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. So I feel with digital technologies, there's a great opportunity there through multimodal technologies.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks.
Lovely. Yep. Thank you for that, Georgina. I'm going to be inviting Vineeta now to really respond to a question around gender equity. So gender equity in school education is another critical area of research, warranting an intersectional lens and recognizing the complex interlinkages between educational access and systemic inequality. Drawing from your research, Vineeta, in the Indian context where women constitute the majority of school teachers, can you share some of the key findings on how existing systems of gender inequity reproduce marginalization of teachers?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. What I'm going to say has been said for over 5 decades. And at one level, we know the texture of inequality that frames our education system and that frames meaningful access, where I mean just not physical access to a school, but also an access where the children actually learn to read and write. Similarly, there is no meaningful access to adult literacy, vocational technical education, and all this requires a lot of work on the ground, as I said. Now, where do teachers come in? Teachers' social status, their position in the overall administrative hierarchy, their subject knowledge, the pedagogic practices, especially those that are promoted in the formal system, that is rote learning and memory-based learning, actually reinforces the inability of the teachers to move at the pace of the children. The teachers do not have much autonomy within the classroom. They are expected to actually teach the curriculum and not move at the pace of the child. Now, let me come to the whole teacher community and women teachers in particular. The teachers as a profession and teachers as a community is not only a marginalized profession in India, but it's also highly feminized. That is, at the primary and elementary level, the majority of teachers are women. But if you go to the higher levels of education, with the exception of maybe Kerala, Tamil Nadu, or Punjab, majority of teachers are men at secondary and senior secondary schools. Now, why are women teachers more marginalized? This is a huge question that we need to ask. You see, the most important issue is that teachers or women teachers actually work in a very unsafe environment. To travel to rural areas, you know that most teachers live in urban areas and they commute to rural areas. So transport, safe transport and communication for women teachers in rural areas, especially in the northern and central parts of India, in eastern India, is a big issue. It may not be in Tamil Nadu or Kerala, where the whole state has got urbanized and infrastructure and transport is very good. Second is that teachers, women teachers, actually face a lot of harassment. They also they actually work in a highly gendered, male-dominated space. And the daily experience of teachers, which I have documented over the last 25, 30 years of women teachers, is quite disheartening. Yes, there are regional differences. These problems may not be so acute in urban areas as it is in rural areas. So therefore, what I'm trying to say is that though the profession is gradually getting feminized and there are many more women, but lack of safe transport, lack of autonomy in the classroom, and the fact that majority of school heads are men, most of the administrators are men, actually leads to a lot of issues with respect to gender relations between the men and women in these societies. Especially when you come to states like Rajasthan, where I live, or Uttar Pradesh, or Madhya Pradesh, or Bihar, the situation of women teachers is much worse than others. Another very, very, very troubling trend is that India has a very large number of contract teachers. I'll be very happy to email to you all a recent report that I've done on the status of contract teachers in India. Now, the problem is that majority of teachers on short-term contracts are women. So they are paid much less. So regular teacher salaries are pretty good. In fact, India is among the best in terms of in the region when it comes to the salaries and perks of the regular formal system teachers. But there is a percentage of 11 to 12% of teachers in India who are on contract, who are part-time teachers, who are what they call guest teachers. And these people are highly vulnerable. And the women among them, especially when you look at a state like West Bengal, almost 90% of your contract teachers are women. So I think there is an inherent gender inequality, which frames the environment in which the teachers actually operate. And I'll just stop with one example, which actually tells a lot about what happens to teachers, especially when it comes to teacher education. When I was doing a huge documentation while I was in NIEPA on the status of teachers in India, what I found that most women teachers said that they're so scared to go to residential teaching programs, especially in Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, West Bengal, because they say that the families are very suspicious if a woman spends a night out of the family in the company of other men. And in fact, in Rajasthan, I have this vivid recollection of the teachers. I had a focus group discussion with teachers, and they said, you know what the men tell us? Sita was sent back to the forest because she was abducted by Ravan. And what will happen to you women if you go to a male-dominated space and spend 5 nights there? So there is a tremendous resistance in these societies to send women. But in spite of that, we don't have women-only teacher training residential programs, which gives confidence to the women, even though the majority of elementary school teachers are women. So what are we trying to do that when we know it's a feminized profession, we know the social norms are the way they are, and it's getting worse. In fact, like all over the world, India is getting more and more polarized. What happens to these teachers? Why is it that we can't have women-only safe spaces where these women teachers can come for continuing education or teacher training?
Thank you, Vineeta. Thank you so much for that. And I think I know that we're a little bit behind time, so I'm going to try and sort of conflate the next little part, because it's a wonderful segue, actually, because if you're thinking about teachers and teacher recruitment more broadly and retention, so what are some of the key challenges, do we think, as a group, so we can do this very quickly and very succinctly, around school teacher development, maybe in the Australian context, but also ensuring rigorous and fair standards around teacher management, processes relating to recruitment? We're hearing this strong sense around gender inequality from Vineeta there, but what are some of those key challenges that we have across our context about the recruitment, development, retention of teachers? And I guess just for me to kick off a little bit, we're experiencing a huge area of teacher shortage in Australia, and it's not just in Australia. This is a differentiated but a worldwide phenomenon. So if we think about teacher education as that continuum from pre-service teacher education right across career long, I think this issue is really very, very complex. It's kind of resistant to policy, has been resistant to policy interventions. It speaks to, I think, in Australia, the attractiveness of the profession. That's a recruitment problem. Issues such as comparative remuneration, a sense of worth and purpose, and broader societal supports, etc. So I'm interested in kind of going around our virtual room here by thinking about what are some of those key challenges around that full spectrum of teacher development, but retention as well. And Vineeta, maybe I'll just start with you with just a quick snapshot of what you think those key challenges are there.
Yeah, there are key challenges related to the training program that are there, because we need to have a revamp in the whole system, and the skills that are required to develop amongst the teachers that have not been really been done adequately. Yeah.
Fantastic. That's really good. Rekha, in kind of a sentence or two, what do you think, are some of the key elements for us here?
Key elements here, I would say, is there's a mismatch between the supply and demand. What we are supplying to schools is not meeting the demand or the policies in schools of departments of education. With the result, our retention is low. Out of field teaching in subjects like geography, we are at the moment 40% teachers are out of field, 30% out of computing. Although when I talk to my colleagues, they say teachers today are better prepared than they were in 70s and 80s when I wasn't here in Australia. But personal feeling is that we need to train them in the transversal competencies the concept which Australian curriculum gave to the world and UNESCO adopted it from us, train our teachers, expose them to school system very early on in first semester of their teaching so that they go and observe the teaching and decide whether they want to continue there or not, instead of wasting their 4 years in the course. They go for their first prac in fourth semester when half the way they are through their course, and then we can't retain them. On the other hand, maybe improve work conditions, workload, salary, not the starting salary, but the later on, after 10 years, they reach the peak. And other option could be, in teachers, we are very low on skilled migration. We are not going to get teachers from developed world.
Yeah.
Can we open up there? And in past, like we had exams for engineers, and we still have AMA has a test for medical doctors to come into the country. Can we have some sort of test so that at least this gap is filled? Because 1/3 of the teachers right now,
creative, aren't we?
30 seconds.
Yeah.
30 seconds. Well, the 1/3 of teachers are, contemplating going and joining as relief teachers, which is not right for the country and future of our country. Thank you.
Yeah, that's true. We've been doing a lot of, we've been doing a significant project and research around teacher attraction, retention, career development, performance appraisal. We're really trying to get all of those systems working together, but it is a global challenge. Georgina, your views on this area around teacher development and retention and all of those sort of areas?
It's a huge issue, Pauline, as you mentioned, that the predicted shortage of teachers is as Rekha mentioned, the supply and demand is just not going to match. So we will need many more people undertaking teaching as a degree. Unfortunately, I feel like we still see it as a second-class program. So we do need to start to value the teaching profession a lot more. Let me take you all back to lockdown days where you were homeschooling your children. How did you feel about teachers then? People really valued them. We need to actually, acknowledge the type of work that they do, the heavy workload that occurs, and think about smaller class sizes, supporting early career teachers through quality programs that when they enter the profession, but also really acknowledging that it's a tough job, and the teacher wellbeing at the moment is quite low.
Thank you. And Vimala, I can see your comments in the chat as well about teachers migrating to the developed world in the last decade and really having a more global response. I think it is a global issue and certainly has been identified. I think it's 4 million teacher shortage or predicted one if we're going to have universal primary education. So I'm very conscious of time and the fact that we've kind of run over time a little bit, and we want to have time for questions. So I'm going to present a bit of a challenge now to our experts here, which is just literally in 3 or 4 words. The closing question is, can you identify one of the shared challenges listening to our conversation today, one shared challenge between Australia and India? And so identify the challenge, and then we might have a discussion with our colleagues or broader colleagues around what the solutions might be. So I'll start, Vimala, we'll just start with one key challenge that you've heard that's shared between us, just in literally words. Yeah.
I think the one key challenge is matching teacher skills and knowledge with the requirements at the school level.
Yeah.
In fact, there is a huge mismatch between what skills and knowledge teachers have and what are the requirements of the school. And then this was the biggest learning from that 9-state teacher study that I did in NIEPA, which was concluded in 2016.
Fantastic. Thank you. Rekha.
Oh, the challenge, there are many, but one I would come down to is recognizing the contribution of teachers in society, whether it's India or Australia, and more so over is the female teachers. Even our 92% female teachers, our primary school teachers are females, and same data is coming out of India.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Recognizing their contribution to society.
Wonderful. Thank you. Vineeta.
Yeah, I would add on to what Professor Vimlaji has said, that we are talking of, in the policy also, we are talking of the 21st century skills. So are we equipping the teachers in the teacher education programs to develop the skills themselves, to identify and what kind of skills would be required? So the skills are really, really required when we are focusing on the teacher development issue and the going forward for the quality of teachers and school education. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Vineeta. Georgina, key challenge.
I think it's access to the curriculum. So we have to keep thinking, who are we still marginalizing through our practices? We need to seriously think about how our education system does continue to perpetuate disadvantage for some communities. So I think, using a term like interculturalization, where we think about what it is like to step in someone else's shoes and think about how can they access the curriculum. So I really love Vimala's comment about policies, a piece of paper. We have to really think about the communities that we're working with.
That's right. And I think I'd probably just like to end up, because we want to have 10 minutes per Q&A, is really just going back to what you've just raised there, Georgina, is saying, that kind of policies, you can have the best policy in the world, but unless it actually has direct reach into the day-to-day practice in schools, then we're not really going to change anything very much. So that kind of alignment, I think, all the way to the classroom. Thank you, colleagues, so very much. And I know that it's a little bit difficult for me to read the webinar chat because for some reason it's kind of very long and skinny on my screen. But it may be that there are people who would like to ask some questions of our panelists. I will try and read up here. Or is there anyone who would like to, I'm assuming you can actually ask a proper question with a voice. Can you do that? Or is it only in the chat?
We do have a question for Vimala from Masumi, if you want me to read it.
Yes, thank you.
I know sometimes it's
really
hard. Yeah.
It's really hard to be able to see it on the screen that I've got at the moment.
So the question is, what could be done to facilitate meaningful actions on the ground to improve schooling experience and teacher education, since implementation of centralised national education policies have failed so far within the diverse Indian context? Great question.
Yeah, I think the new policy talks about school complex as the unit. A school complex is a complex of, say, between 15 to 25 schools. And I think we need effective, functional, day-to-day autonomy at that school complex level to be able to plan and execute the plan for those 15 or 20 schools. Because the challenges in a tribal area with respect to dual languages, as Vineeta talked, or a challenge in an area of fully urban migrants talking different languages at home and coming to a school space would be very different. So I think the only way to move forward is to really enhance the powers, responsibilities, and autonomy at the school complex level, which is technically been provided for in the 2020 policy, but we do not know whether it will be implemented in earnest.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm just having real trouble reading questions here. I've got, probably needs a little bit of help to do.
I can read it out for you. While school access and enrollment has improved drastically in India, in the post-RTE, do you think that teachers are sufficiently equipped to handle the diverse learners that have entered the classroom in the post-RTE phase? Why and why not?
Great question. And I'm just going to open that up for our experts who would like to contribute here. I know that there's lots of research data that shows that even in high-performing countries, it's actually quality of teaching is actually increased by all measures, but what teachers are grappling with are increased diversity. So that is really impacting even in high-performing countries. So I'd invite with one of our colleagues here who would like to respond to that question.
Well, can I come in?
Yes, definitely,
Yeah.
Vineeta. Thank you.
Yeah, see, the whole thing comes around the teacher training programs that are going on, because we have the policy and we have the diversity of the children coming from all socioeconomic backgrounds. And I have been interacting with the teachers in the schools also. So they are really facing problem of how to tackle with them, because there are diverse problems coming up also. So that area needs to be taken in focus when we are designing the curriculum for teacher education programs. And that is a must, because unless and until we equip the teachers how to tackle these problems, it will be very difficult to deal with the diverse population that is coming up now. Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. I can see a question here. Oh, it's actually just a comment, I think, Georgina, of your comment there. I wonder if you want to speak that out loud. There might be somebody like me who's having just a problem reading.
Just quickly, look, this is an issue for Australian teachers as well, but I know teacher education programs across the country try very hard to include information about addressing diverse learners' needs throughout the whole program. But, you know, if we think about the medical profession, when doctors graduate, they don't know everything. It's an ongoing learning journey. So I think quality professional development is needed throughout teaching careers in this topic.
Yeah. And I really like Vimala's comment here around teachers having the autonomy to teach at the right level and at the right pace, that kind of level of autonomy to be able to respond to the students that are in front of you, rather than to try and deliver a one-size-fits-all experience across a country or across contexts. Thank you for that. Now, do we have any more? Okay, we've got some. Thank you for putting an email in there, Bimala, that's right.